I've been working in patient experience for 12 years now. And as Susan mentioned, I started my career in patient experience at Cleveland Clinic and held a few roles in the Office of Patient Experience there, including teaching service recovery classes to frontline staff. I was promoted to Director of Service Excellence, and in that role, it was my responsibility to make sure that service recovery was delivered consistently across Cleveland Clinic's health system. I then joined a colleague who started her own consulting practice, and we worked with organizations across the country, helping them build service recovery programs. And then in 2016, I joined NRC Health and have continued a lot of the same work with NRC's clients. It has been a privilege to work with organizations across the country who are committed to improving the experience of patients and their loved ones and employees. So I'm always thrilled to spend time with organizations like you. I am also absolutely excited about service recovery. It is one of my favorite things to talk about. And like the gentleman in this cartoon, I believe that service recovery helps organizations turn misery into moments of magic. And so for the next hour and a half or so, I would like to share with you some thoughts on service recovery. And specifically, our conversation will include these topics. We'll define service recovery and review why it's important. I'll identify 3 components of a service recovery strategy, and then I will share suggestions to strengthen your organization's service recovery approach. And I use the word conversation here intentionally. I will ask some questions throughout the presentation and ask that you take yourself off mute to respond. As Susan said, please use the chat feature to share any questions or comments. And also feel free to stop me at any point to share stories that you have related to what I'll be sharing, and also share any pushback. So if I am saying something that you don't agree with or you have another opinion, please let's talk about it, because I view opportunities like this as a chance for me to learn as well. So this next slide just reiterates some of the housekeeping items that Susan shared. So if everyone could please put yourself on mute so that we don't hear background noises, and feel free to unmute yourselves to respond to questions or to interject any comments or pushback. We would love it if you could keep your camera on so that we can see your faces, but certainly understand if you want to turn your camera off because the system is running slow. Again, we'll be together for about an hour and a half, and I'll check in with you about midway through to see if you would like to take a 5-minute break.
The scrubs, they only have
and then lastly, I'm just going to ask that you
size small
participate.
And the one that she likes.
So it sounds like someone is having a conversation and not on mute. So again, as a reminder, please mute yourselves so that we don't hear any background noise. I'm sure you're all experts now on Zoom, but just again, a quick reminder, the mute function is down here in the left corner. You can start or stop your video by using the video camera icon, and then the chat feature is listed there as well.
But that means we only have one.
Just again, another reminder to please mute yourselves. We are able to hear some side conversations right now. So if you're not on mute, please take this opportunity to mute yourself. Thank you very much. So let's get started. What is service recovery and why is it important? At NRC Health, we define service recovery as making right what went wrong. And we all know that in healthcare, things can go wrong despite our best efforts. Our systems can fail us. Technology often doesn't work the way that we hope that it will. Sometimes we get backed up, or we even say things that we
And they
don't
only have,
intend.
well, we like the cargo pants ones,
And
right?
it is our,
This is really annoying. Caitlin needs to put herself on mute. Is the woman named Caitlin who is talking about scrub sizes? Thank you.
thank you, Janet, for that. And thank you for muting yourself. So again, we know that things go wrong despite our best efforts, and our ability to embrace those service failures, to embrace it when patients are disappointed or have unmet expectations, and do what we can to turn those situations around. That shapes how our patients see us as individuals, how they see your organization, and ultimately how they see their experience. So now I would like for you all to reflect, and I'm going to ask two people to share. So recall a time that you were the recipient of excellent service recovery. So perhaps you were at a restaurant or interacting with a utility company, or maybe even a healthcare experience, and you had a disappointment or unmet expectation, or something just didn't go the way that you had hoped. What did that organization or person do to turn that situation around for you, to make right what went wrong? And specifically, I want you to share the behaviors that were present, and what is your current impression of that person or organization? So if I may ask two people to please unmute yourselves and share a time you were a recipient of excellent service recovery.
Hospital, and a personal.
Now, I understand that you all are not a shy group, so I'll allow one more minute for at least, let's say, one person to unmute yourselves and give an example of excellent service recovery.
I'll share. I'm Diane from Spalding, Cape Cod.
Hi, Diane. Thank you for sharing.
I had an experience in a healthcare situation. I was at Stanford and was getting PT, and they were opening a new clinic. And so they clarified, I got a text message, go to the one in Redwood City. So I went to that one, and no, it should have been the one in Portola Valley. So I kind of, and they were, I was really annoyed. And the receptionist, first of all, got the head therapist and said, we're going to squeeze you in, and we're so sorry, but we're opening the new clinic and it wasn't loaded into the system yet, and kind of explained to me what the background of it was. And they saw me there, and they were like genuinely apologetic for the situation. And then they gave me all these Starbucks cards, which I didn't really need, but they, and they couched it with saying, these aren't to make up for the, the inconvenience and frustration, but we just want you to know how much we value you. And so I thought they did an incredibly nice job with it. So, I worked there, so, it was really nice to see my own organization at the time do such a nice job.
Yeah, that sounds really like they did a nice job. Thank you for sharing, Diane. I just want to paraphrase a few things that I heard you say. So it sounds like you were given instructions to go to one location when in fact you should have been somewhere else, and you were annoyed by that. And the person at the front desk, now was this the person that you spoke with originally?
Yes, because she was like, oh, your appointment's not in Redwood City, it's in Portola Valley. And I'd be like, no, I have the text here, it was Redwood City. And no, she goes, no, I have you Portola. Like, and at first it was kind of like, that's why I think I was getting annoyed. Mm-hmm. And I had actually called before the appointment because I thought it was Portola Valley. And it wasn't. It was Redwood City. And they said, no, Redwood City. So when I called, so I think it was just like all the stuff in Epic was all mixed up. So
Sure. So this person eventually, sounds like she got to a point where she owned the mistake, apologized for it. And I also heard that she said something like, we understand your frustration and how inconvenient this is for you. So she acknowledged what you were going through and then gave you something, Starbucks gift cards, which you can never go wrong with that, as a token to help turn this situation around. Right? Is that how it went? So those were the specific behaviors that were present.
Yes. And they also got me into an appointment with another therapist. So I didn't end up missing a therapy appointment. So.
And that's probably the most important thing, right? Is that they got you in so that your expectations were then met. You got what you came there to receive. That's right. Perfect. Thank you for sharing, Diane. How about one more person? An example of receiving excellent service recovery. Do we have one other who can share?
I can. This is Joanne Fusale from Spalding, Cambridge. It's not a healthcare situation, but I had brought my car in for a scheduled service. And I was there for a couple hours, and they came out after a couple hours and told me that the part that they had ordered, it was a part to replace something in my car. They thought that it had arrived and it hadn't. And so they were very apologetic that they couldn't complete the service for me and I would have to come back another day, which is a huge problem because, you know, I work full time. So what they did is I had scheduled another appointment. They actually came to my work, which was quite a distance for them. And they came and they picked up the car during my work hours and then they returned it while I was still working. So it didn't impact my work at all, which is something that they never do. But I was very impressed that they understood my concern and they went above and beyond. You know, of course they did the usual apologizing and saying how, you know, upset they were because they thought the part had been delivered. Mm-hmm. But for them to make this trek from Peabody to Cambridge to pick up the car, which took two people, you know, one had to drive the other and then bring it back. I was really impressed that they did that.
Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic, Joanne. Thank you for sharing. Again, I'll paraphrase that you had an appointment to get your car fixed. They didn't have the part that they needed to make that repair. You were waiting there a long time. They apologized. They expressed how upset they were that this didn't work out for you. And then they went above and beyond to fix it, even coming to your job, not interrupting your day at all, picking up your car. And you even noted that this isn't something that they would normally do. So all of those things exactly, I think, contribute to excellent service recovery. So keep those examples in mind throughout our conversation today. So why is service recovery important? There are a few reasons. The first is financial. I want to call your attention to the left side of this table, word of mouth. And I'm just going to walk you through this formula. So what this says is that if you have one patient who is dissatisfied, the research tells us that that patient can tell at least 12 people about that bad experience. And I always joke, if you're like me, you tell like 37 people. But the research says that you will tell at least 12 people. And then if we multiply that by a level of influence, which means that the percent of people who will take that negative feedback personally, and they will not go to that business or stop going to that business if they are a current consumer. So the level of influence here is 30.9%. So if we multiply 30.9 times 12, we get 4 people who are influenced. And again, those 4 people will not come back to your organization or give your organization a chance because they've heard negative feedback about you. If we multiply those 4 people by the average net patient revenue of $2,774, the financial impact is about $11,000. So your organization can stand to lose $11,000 because one person shared negative word of mouth feedback about you. Now, if we look at the the right side of this table, which is probably more realistic, is the impact of social media. So that we have that same person who is dissatisfied. The research shows that on average, one person has at least 500 followers on social media. So 500 Facebook friends or LinkedIn connections or Instagram followers. And if we take that same level of influence of 30.9, that means that 155 people will be influenced by negative feedback that's posted online. We multiply that by the net patient revenue, the average net patient revenue. Now we get nearly $500,000 that your organization is at risk for because one patient was dissatisfied. So that's a significant financial impact. Another reason that service recovery is so important is its relationship to loyalty. Now, this graph shows what's called the service recovery paradox. And what it says is that if any consumer goes to an organization and has a service failure, and if that service failure is followed by successful recovery, that consumer will be more loyal to that organization than if there was no failure at all. So think about that as it relates to the work that we do. A patient comes to your organization, something goes wrong, you take all the steps to fix it, turn that situation around. That patient will be more loyal to you than if they had a perfect experience. And then the last, and to me, the most important reason to have a robust service recovery strategy is that it's the right thing to do. I believe that patients tell us when things go wrong, when they have an unmet expectation or a disappointment. They let us know that because they trust us. They trust that we will do something about it. And we have to honor that trust by doing what we can to turn those situations around. So I believe that every organization's patient experience strategy should include a robust service recovery strategy. And that service recovery strategy should include these 3 components. The first is point of service. The second is how you handle service alerts. And lastly, aligning point of service and service alerts with your current grievance management process. So now let's talk about each of these components, starting with point of service. I see point of service recovery as both a philosophy and a skill set. And by that, I mean every single person in your organization, no matter what their job title or role, should have the skills to embrace concerns, respond with empathy, and take ownership to address those concerns. And here's why that is important. The research tells us that 65% of complaining customers will complain to frontline staff. And what I often say to healthcare leaders is that this means that your teams will receive patient complaints before you know anything about it. And the way that your employees handle those concerns and complaints will shape that patient's perception of their experience. The research also tells us that when we address concerns at the point of service, It decreases formal complaints. And then lastly, patients report having a better experience when their issues are addressed before they leave your organization. Now, there are many service recovery communication models out there. At Cleveland Clinic, we use the HEART model. I know that organizations use a HEART model or LEAD or HEAT or AAA. And what I found is that the acronyms may be different, but the skills are the same. And those skills are as follows. The first is to listen to the person. Give that person your full and undivided attention. Make sure that you are displaying positive body language. So I often say, square your shoulders, face your heart to that person's heart. Lean in to show that you are really listening. Nod or use comfortable hand gestures. Make sure that you are also using comfortable eye contact. And I say comfortable eye contact because you don't want to stare that person down or give them crazy eyes, but comfortable eye contact to show that you are really listening to that person. And then you want to empathize with them. So say out loud how you believe the person is feeling or what they are going through. So you might say something like, wow, you seem really upset. Or man, I can't imagine how afraid you must be right now. Or man, that seems really tough. And the empathy is the magic in service recovery. Because when you say out loud how you believe a person is feeling or what they are going through, you will often see them physically disarm. Their shoulders may lower. They may give a sigh of relief. And that is because they know that you understand what they are going through. An emotional connection has been made at that point. And then there's the apology. So expressing regret without pointing the finger, without making excuses, without blaming someone. Sometimes a simple apology is enough. I'm sorry. And then own it. Own that situation. Do what you can to turn it around. It doesn't matter if you had nothing to do with it. Still, take ownership. Use the pronoun I will, instead of we will, to show that you personally are accountable to turn that situation around. And then thank the person. Thank them for bringing the concern to your attention. Thank them for trusting your organization with their care. And it's also good practice to end the interaction by asking, is there anything else I can do for you? So if you think about those steps and the examples that Joanne and Diane shared earlier, all of those steps were present. It sounds like the people in that clinic and also at that car repair shop, they listened to the concerns. They empathized by saying things like, I'm sorry you were inconvenienced. They apologized. They owned the situation and went out of their way to do what was necessary to make it right. And then they thanked both Joanne and Diane for their business. And what I heard both Joanne and Diane say is that they were impressed by that they were proud. Diane said she was proud of that organization for going through these steps. My guess is that both Joanne and Diane will go back to these organizations again because of the service recovery that they received. So service recovery is critical to an organization's success. We often talk about service recovery as a gift to our patients, and it is also a gift to our employees as well. A few of you completed an assessment that Zoe sent out, and one of the questions was, do most leaders view service recovery as a leadership responsibility rather than empowering employees to earn service recovery situations? And an overwhelming majority of you agreed with that statement. So you see service recovery as a leadership responsibility. And I think that that is admirable. I think that oftentimes leaders want to protect their employees from service recovery situations. They want to take that on themselves. And again, I can see why leaders want to do that. I will say though, that if you teach your employees how to handle service recovery situations, you are giving them a gift. As I noted just a bit ago, and more than the majority of times, your employees will be faced with service recovery situations before you have the opportunity to do anything about it. And if your employees don't have the skills, they can become defensive in these situations. They can take it personally, or worse yet, they can lash out at that patient. I'll share a story. My boss at Cleveland Clinic was teaching a service recovery class to a group of providers. And during the class, a provider raised his hand and said, you know, can I share something? I'm interested how you would handle this situation. My boss said, of course. So the provider said, you know, I was having a busy day in clinic. I was running behind, and I noticed that there was a woman and her husband on my schedule, and I've been seeing this woman for a very long time. So they were waiting in the exam room, and I knew they had been waiting for a while. So I knock on the exam room door, I walk in, and the husband jumps up and says to me, you know, listen, doctor, we've been waiting here a long time. And I don't know who you think you are, but our time is just as valuable as your time. And so my boss said, wow, that sounds really hard. So what did you do? And the doctor says, I said to that husband, you know what, sir, I'm a very important, busy doctor. And if you don't want to wait, you can leave. So again, my boss says, man, that sounds tough too. How did you feel about that? And the doctor responded, I felt terrible. I really cared about that patient. I've been taking care of her for a long time. And you know what? They left, and I've never seen her again. So I share this story as an example that when our employees have the skills to do service recovery well, they are more professional, more confident, and more composed in those tough situations. They can experience less stress at work because those situations are stressful. And when we don't handle it well, like that doctor did, we can carry that with us throughout our day. It can impact how we treat other patients and how we interact with our coworkers. All employees can directly impact the patient experience when they do service recovery well. And service recovery teaches us skills to convey empathy. So here's an example, and I'm sure many of you have been in situations like this, where a patient might say, you know, I've been waiting forever, much like that husband said to that provider at Cleveland Clinic. I've been waiting forever. What's going on around here? And here's how you might use service recovery skills. Again, listen to that person. Give them your undivided attention. Fully focus on them. Make comfortable eye contact. Square your shoulders. Listen for facts as well as emotions. And then acknowledge their emotions before addressing the facts. So saying something like, waiting is frustrating. Apologize without placing blame or pointing the finger or making excuses. I'm so sorry you've been waiting. Own the situation. Again, use the pronoun I instead of we. I'm going to check to see how much longer it will be. Thank the person. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. And then conclude with, is there anything else I can do for you? Now, service recovery, again, we often talk about it in the context of how can we turn around situations that have gone wrong for our patients. Service recovery is also very important to use with our coworkers as well. We can use service recovery to attend to emotions, because we all know that the healthcare, interacting in healthcare is emotional. Our patients come to us feeling frustrated, angry, worried, afraid, and so do our employees. Our coworkers feel those same range of emotions. So here's an example. Let's just say your coworker says to you, I've been working as hard as I can. It's never good enough for these patients. Rather than responding with something like, I know what you mean. These patients think this is a hotel or something, which doesn't help. It only makes the situation worse. You can also use service recovery. So again, give that person your full and undivided attention. Use positive body language. Listen for facts and as well as emotions. Address their emotions first. So empathize by saying something like, man, it sounds like you're having a hard day. Apologize. I'm so sorry for that. And then own the situation. Would it help if I took your calls while you took a short break? Or, I'm on my way to the cafeteria right now. Can I bring you back a coffee? Or I'll round on your patients for you. Why don't you take a walk around the building? It's a beautiful day outside. And then thank the person. Thank you for letting me know. I wouldn't want you to go through your day feeling overwhelmed. And then concluding by asking, is there anything else I can do for you? So I just want to pause for a moment and ask if anyone has any questions, comments, or pushback about anything I've said so far. Please feel free to take yourselves off mute to comment.
Or if anyone has questions.
Yes.
Hi, it's Mary Campbell. Everything sounds great so far. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Now, a few of you noted that on the assessment that your organization uses a service recovery communication model. Is there a person or two who can respond to what model you use and how impactful you believe it is for your organization?
I can comment quickly on the model that I think we use, at least in part, at Mass General, because I think Liza and Mary are on the call, but I'm not sure. But we use a model
Yes,
called
I'm here,
Mary,
Susan.
do you want to talk about eye care? Because I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, we use an eye care model kind of broadly, but very specifically around service recovery is LEAD. So it's the model that you mentioned earlier. And, I'd say that as with any model, frankly, if they're as effective as the individuals engage with them, during the conversation with the patient and family. So, but that said, I think that it is important to have a model, to train on that, and to create consistent language around the organization. And I think to acknowledge that one is never done communicating, reinforcing that as we go. But that happens to be the model that we use. And as Susan said, embedded. Sorry, I don't know why I have my video off. That's not intentional. As well as embedded, that's kind of the overarching model that we use, though, is eye care. But for things beyond just service recovery.
Mary, for my benefit, can you say what the LEAD acronym stands for?
Listen, empathize, apologize, and do, I think, is the D. But similar to own, it's all
The right thing.
As you mentioned, it's the same stuff. It's just, slightly. And we communicate that regularly. We have point of service recovery where people are frontline staff are authorized to give parking vouchers or coffee. We have a place called Coffee Central, coffee cards and things. And so we do make sure to emphasize that model as we, as people distribute those, or as people try to sort of acknowledge patients' inconveniences, et cetera. So it's a model that's been in place for a while. But as I said, it's only as effective as the individual is when he or she is communicating with the patient and family.
Yeah, that's so true, Mary. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. I mean, I think that it just requires a lot of practice to get good at using the model. And one of my suggestions always is to give opportunities for your employees to practice. And I think this also speaks to the point about leaders, rather than having a culture where your employees come to you for service recovery, that you sort of give them a little nudge and allow them to take care of those situations so that they do become better and better at it. Any other comments or thoughts about the service recovery communication model?
This is Mary. Okay.
Go ahead. Somebody was about to speak.
This is Robin Klein from Cooley Dickinson. So we've done some service recovery training, and we've used the ACT model, which is very similar: apologize, correct, and thank. But what we haven't done is implemented like gifts you give to patients, like cards and things like that. We had presented a plan to our patient advisory council, and they had said, if you gave me, a CVS card or something like that after a problem, I would just feel angrier. Yeah. And so I guess it's been we've been wanting to implement something like that, but I think it's making sure that people present that in the right way so that it doesn't seem like as if that's the apology somehow, or that's that's going to make it better for that person. I don't know if you have any comments about that.
I do.
And I'm happy to comment too if you like.
Sure, I would. Mary, why don't you go ahead and then I'll follow you.
Oh, okay. And it's just a simple, probably self-evident thing. So what we try to do, often we get complaints around excessive wait time. So the idea is to try to, the gift of the parking voucher, for example, that we use is intended to not add salt to the wound, so to speak, that not only do we have patients waiting indefinitely, we also then make them pay for it as the parking charges continue to accumulate. So the idea is to try to match the inconvenience that patients have suffered with the gesture that we try to that we give to patients, if you follow. So we don't have Starbucks certificates or an Amazon gift card or something like that either. It's what we do, one can redeem in the hospital itself or in the area itself, if that's.
No, yeah, thank you for sharing. And that would be my advice as well. So as you can see, I skipped ahead a couple of slides. I've worked with organizations that include what I call a service recovery tool. So some sort of monetary gesture to help with service recovery, often a coupon of some sort. I've worked with organizations that do that and some that don't. And I will say that if I look at their patient experience scores and how effectively their service recovery program is, the token isn't what makes or break the service recovery program. It is actually the language. Another example I will give you is when I work with a colleague in that small consulting practice I told you about. We work with a very large organization, a complicated health system, and they were spending about $500,000 a year on coupons for coffee, parking vouchers, bus tickets, and they brought us in because they wanted us to teach their employees how to say, "I'm sorry." And within a year's time, they had significantly decreased the amount of money they were spending on those coupons because they found that their employees didn't really need them. So that patients and family members were satisfied with that sincere apology. So with that said, I agree with Mary. If you're gonna use a token, it's best practice to make sure that the token matches the complaint. Because, and if it doesn't, that token can just be viewed as condescending and can really escalate the situation. So I don't know if anyone has any additional comments about that, about the token.
Actually, Toya, you all are reminding me of an experience I had. I was running, I was the head of an organization that was running a big conference for about 700 people at a hotel in St. Louis. And pretty much everything that could go wrong went wrong. The food wasn't right. The breakout room, all the rooms were not set up the way they were supposed to be. And so we kept having meetings with the hotel to fix things. And their response was they just kept sending me platters of food to my room. And I'm like, this is nuts. You know, I could throw a party for everyone here just with the food you're sending me. Please fix the problems.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously we never went back to that hotel or even that hotel chain.
Yeah.
Because I was just sitting there thinking, this is service recovery run amok. I mean, this is just horrible. And it made everyone even more upset.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. That's a perfect example of how the token didn't match the complaint. And it sounds like, Susan, at the end of the day, you wanted the problem fixed. And there's no amount of fruit platters that was going to help with that, right? So yeah, I think be careful. I often run into organizations that believe that service recovery means giving something. You know, that's how they define it. And I always try to help organizations rethink that, because many organizations don't have budgets to give something. And so we should not do effective service recovery because we don't have budgets to give people something. So thank you for those comments. I'm just going to go back a little bit and talk about the importance of managing up in service recovery. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page with the definition of managing up, it is to use positive statements to demonstrate everyone is working together. And these are statements that provide assurance to the patient and also build trust. So I have seen that in service recovery situations, employees can make it worse. So let's say, for example, a patient can say to you, you know, I had to wait a long time for someone to answer my call light. And the employer responds, well, you know, we're short-staffed today. So that just makes the situation worse, right? Automatically, that patient is feeling unsafe, like they don't have the staff, that we don't have the staff to care for them. It's an excuse. And so rather than saying something like we're short-staffed, the employee can say, again, listen, use the model, listen to that person, empathize with them. Wow, I know it is really frustrating to have to wait. Apologize. I'm so sorry you have to wait so long. You know, offer a statement to build trust. We're committed to taking the best possible care of you. What can I do right now to help? You know, thank you for bringing this to my attention is the thank. And then is there anything else that I can do? So oftentimes we talk about managing up as a communication technique to build trust, to demonstrate teamwork. I think that we can also use this technique in service recovery. The other thing that I want to point out about service recovery, point of service recovery, is that there are some times where we are faced with situations that are much more serious than someone waiting, or their food order was wrong, or their appointment time got mixed up. Unfortunately, there are times where patients are really angry. Maybe they are threatening. Perhaps the employee feels unsafe. That patient may be using profanity. And I do not condone that at all. I think that that is unacceptable. I also think that employees should be empathic in those situations as well. and they can lean on your communication model with some adjustments. So for example, let's say that a patient was being really rude to me, yelling at me, using profanity. I would use the model, but adjust my tone of voice, use a stronger, more serious tone of voice. If I was in person, I would make sure that there was safe distance between myself and that person. I might use a scissor stand. So, one foot in front of the other. Again, planting my feet, but doing so in a way that I could leave that area quickly if I needed to. I would let the person know that I wanted to help them, but couldn't and won't under these circumstances. So for example, I would empathize with that person and say something like, I know that you are really upset, and apologize. I'm sorry. And I can't help you if you yell at me that way. And then own the situation. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go get my boss, and together we can figure out how to turn this around for you. And then I appreciate you letting me know. Conclude by asking, is there anything else that I can do for you? So I just want to, again, ask you to take yourselves off of mute, and I'm interested in your comments or even pushback about using the service recovery model in these really challenging situations. What experience you might have, or what pushback you might have.
Hi, this is Mary Beth from the Faulkner. This really strikes me. You made a comment, Toya, about like the inappropriate use of the service recovery. Yeah. And I think at this point, if someone is this upset, tossing a parking ticket at them isn't going to do anything. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that we've done is we've let our employees down, because despite the fact that we have a service recovery plan in place and we have coupons and we give coffee or parking, I don't think we've taught them this part, how to kind of de-escalate so that the patient feels that we're listening to them, and then can also accept whatever apology that we're giving. We don't do a good job of this.
Thank you for sharing that, Mary Beth, and for your honesty. And I will tell you, again, I work with hospitals across the country, and there are many organizations who have an opportunity to strengthen their service recovery approach. And I think, Susan asked me to come in today to speak because your organization is at that part of your patient experience journey where you realize that this is necessary, not only for your patients, but also for your employees.
Can I make one comment about this particular, these kinds of situations? One of the things that I've learned at Mass General is our head of police and security, Bonnie Michaelman, sponsors a training program called MOAB. And I never remember what the acronym stands for, but it's a program that helps deal with these kinds of situations. And I've actually, I was part of a research grant where we had research assistants that were approaching people to participate and to recruit them to join a study, and that were also sometimes alone in an exam room with people where they ran into situations that were scary. And we had all of them go through this training, and it was actually quite amazing. Thank you. Someone just said it's management of aggressive behavior. That should be easy to remember, but thank you. And it was very valuable. And what I also think it's actually very valuable in your entire life, because we often can be in situations where we feel maybe threatened or afraid, and it's a way of de-escalating. And I think it's actually quite powerful. So I don't know if others are using that same kind of training, but I think it's something we might want to think about.
So this is Cheryl at Nantucket, and we do use MOAB because it's also, it's very important when you're working with behavioral health too. But
yeah.
I find I've been in multiple organizations, and I think that this part is the hardest part to train on, because it's not it's really the natural thing to do is to become defensive. And most people, when I observe them interacting, are, you know, become defensive and trying to make excuses for what happened, which this person is past that point. And so I work really hard to say, this is this patient's perception, and there's no way you're going to change that perception by trying to make them see it the way you see it. And so again, it's just not really a natural thing. And in all those organizations, just like what was said earlier, it's a very difficult thing to train on. And I think therefore often it isn't trained, the staff are not trained well to do it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Cheryl. You're absolutely right. You know, one of the things that I have said in my service recovery training is that it is, I think when we're in these sorts of situations, our human instinct is to want to explain it, you know, like you said, to get that person to see our side of the story. And what I have often said is that in these situations, the person is really usually not interested in that. Like, this is about attending to their emotions. This is about, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about this person is upset. And when we attend to emotions, that is what typically de-escalates the situation. Would you agree with that, Cheryl?
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes, I would agree with it. And because by explaining only causes escalation.
Exactly.
And I'll even say sometimes, you know, it's even difficult for those of us that do this all the time. To not have that instinct, or they catch you at a wrong moment and not have that instinct to want to say, okay, that isn't the situation. I just wish you could, in my brain, I'm thinking, I wish you would understand that. However, because there are people that you're going to use all these techniques and still not be successful. But for the most part, 99.9%, I can de-escalate them. But again, you have to be very natural. There has to be some natural instinct to do this.
Yes, I agree with that. And I also have seen, again, as I mentioned earlier, with practice, you get better at it. And I want to comment on your comment that 99.9% of the time it works. And yes, there is that small percent of the time where it may not work, and that person will leave still unhappy and dissatisfied. And if that employee has the skills and they can say, I did it, I did what I was supposed to do in that situation, then that is all we can ask for. Now, right? Your comments on that, Cheryl?
I would, yeah. And the deal is that you have to know when you're not going to be successful.
Exactly.
So you have to let them go.
Yeah.
If and just end it with the right words, and that would be, I'm sorry, I couldn't, you know, I couldn't solve this to your satisfaction, but I most certainly will be willing to talk with you at any other time, or and perhaps we can work through and resolve your concerns.
Yes.
And, you know, and just work with them in that way. But again, yeah, don't try, if they're trying to leave and they're at that, you kind of have to know that instinctively, but don't try to stop them, because actually they want you to.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
you're right. You
keep
gotta know
escalating.
when, yes, you have to know when to back down. And that's for sure. So
Toya, can I make a quick comment
yes,
about this?
please.
And I know many of you on the call have probably heard me share this before, but in the CAPS research that I do, we regularly sponsor webinars that feature top performing places that use the different types of CAPS surveys. And a few years ago, we had a webinar on the top performing health plans. And one of them was a Medicaid plan in Oregon that had unbelievably positive patient experience scores, which really kind of surprised me because it's a challenging population who have a lot of stress. There are a lot of issues about getting the right care when you are on Medicaid, et cetera. And they had really outstanding scores. And when they presented what they shared with us, which I've never forgotten, obviously, is that they knew that a lot of the people that they took care of had experienced different types of trauma in their life. And the way that they would respond to certain triggers or even just body language was very different than of people that had not had those kinds of experiences. They also knew that that was true of many of their staff. And so they did a very deliberate training program about how you approach and how you manage situations where the person may be reacting about something that happened to them when they were 5, and you're just bearing the brunt of it. And how do you de-escalate and how do you show empathy? And that was partly what they contributed their incredible success to. And there are training programs like this that, you know, at some point, I think down the road, as we get better at this, we maybe should even be thinking about. And especially in some of our settings where we have patients coming from very different backgrounds from our staff, and we don't understand the cultural issues that we might be dealing with and that sort of thing.
Well, that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that, Susan. The other, you know, sort of related question I have for this group is, you know, as we are asking employees to own service recovery situations, we have to acknowledge that some of those situations might be difficult. And as a few of you have said, we may not always handle it the best way. And I think we can agree that we can hold on to that and carry it with us, and that can impact how we treat other patients, how we interact with our coworkers. I mean, you know, I was giving this presentation a few months ago to an organization, and a nurse manager said, yeah, Toya, you know, I just was in a situation where a patient spit on a nurse. And I was devastated by that, the nurse manager says. And then my response was, what did you do to help that nurse heal? And I just want to open that question up to this group. I know that many of our organizations have programs to help with resilience and burnout and stress in the workplace, but I don't know that we often align that with our service recovery efforts, and I think that we should. And so again, to this group, what do you do to help your employees heal from these difficult situations that they may encounter when doing service recovery?
Hi, this is Mary Campbell from Partners Health at Home. And we do huddles on service excellence. And so every team throughout the organization holds a weekly huddle just solely on service recovery, de-escalation, service excellence. And it is a time for our staff just to talk about situations. So if the topic for that week on the agenda is de-escalation, I always screw up that word, and they're asked to bring some examples where they've been in the situation, and then their team as a group, they talk about it, and there's a manager, of course, facilitating it, helping them out. So I do think it helps the staff to be able to discuss the some of the problems that they encountered during the week or during the month and get support from their manager and their team on a very regular basis.
Yes, I agree with you. I can imagine that that is really impactful, Mary. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? What are you doing?
I just wanted to, I'm Pauline, I'm over at Spalding, Cambridge.
Hi, Pauline.
And I just wanted to more tell a story than maybe give a solution.
Yes, please.
We had a nurse who was kicked in the face a few weeks ago.
I'm so sorry.
By a patient, and it was on the weekend, and I got the call from the supervisor that this happened, and you know, my first instinct was, oh my God, poor nurse, and I know some people were like, some poor patient, and I do understand that the patient was confused and combative, and they were trying to give care. So my concern was, because, you know, from a medical standpoint, we were able to get the patient in a good place. The nurse, however, I didn't want her to feel that, okay, you're not important, we only cared about the patient. So I started, you know, like texting her and calling her and saying, okay, how are you? You know, every day I would check in on her when she was out. When she came to work, she was still having some headaches, and she worked 12-hour shifts. So I would just reach out to her in the mornings when she come in and say, okay, how are you feeling today? In the middle of the day, I would say, okay, are you up for a 12 or do you want to go home at 3? And so, you know, I just made sure that I continuously check on her just to make sure that she knows that, you know, we are not just treating her as another nurse. This was something that should not have happened in the workplace. It's one of the hazards of the career, but I didn't want her to feel alone in this whole situation. And granted, she was being followed by OC Health, but I felt like at the unit level, she needed some support. So, you know, up until recently, I think I met with her on Monday, and she's like, okay, I think you can stop checking on me now. I think I'm okay. So I just kind of wanted to bring that story out, just because sometimes, you know, we spend a lot of time saying, okay, the customer is always right, and we don't realize that sometimes we diminish our staff's their confidence and you know, their spirit if sometimes we don't take a few moments to just give them a little bit of something for what they went through. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Pauline. It's a perfect story, and kudos to you for being such a strong leader to recognize that that nurse needed you in that moment, in those moments, to check in on her. I'm sure she felt supported and cared about. So thank you. So, you know, as you are thinking about your service recovery strategy, please think about what resources, approaches, management skills you are going to employ to show your teams how much they are supported and cared about if they find themselves in these really tough situations. So here are some additional suggestions as you are building out your service recovery strategy. First and foremost is empower your staff to address concerns and complaints. I've mentioned this a few times already. Give your teams the gift of learning the skills and let them practice those skills by using them in service recovery situations. That doesn't mean that you should completely remove yourself. You know, like Pauline has said, stay there, be supportive, have those huddles, you know, let people debrief, do role play in your huddles and team meetings so that people get good at this skill set. That also speaks to the next point, is offer training. I often recommend that organizations include service recovery training in their new employee orientation so that all new employees understand that service recovery is a part of their job, no matter what their title is. I've worked with organizations to develop what I call learning bites, so short, 5 to 7 minute lessons that they can use in team meetings and huddles to reinforce the skills and practice. I also think it's a good idea to include service recovery as an annual competency, just like you would with HIPAA or the other things that we refresh on annually. Build service recovery into recognition and reward programs and your performance evaluations. When I was at Cleveland Clinic, there was a line on our performance evaluation that asked how effective and consistent was the employee at using our HEART model. And so we were evaluated on that every year. Address service breakdowns or service failures through process improvement efforts. So what you will find is that your employees will become less effective at service recovery if they have to apologize for the same things over and over again. So do what you can to fix problems. Help your staff establish acceptable boundaries and actions. So knowing what they can do in particular situations. And then develop and share an escalation process so that employees don't feel like they are in this alone. That if situations get beyond what they can handle, they know the steps to take. So to the point of establishing boundaries, Susan shared just a fantastic article that she was a co-author of that was published by AHRQ that shared some additional thoughts around how we can empower our teams and provide some guidelines, guide rails for them during service recovery situations. Susan, I hate to put you on the spot, but would you like to comment on this?
Actually, no, Toya. You can. No, I think I'd love to hear your thoughts about it and how you've seen this kind of thing used.
Sure.
But this is, for everybody on the call, this is actually from the CAPS Improvement Guide, which is a book that we wrote and have updated regularly that's free and available on the ARC website that has a lot of information about how to improve your patient experience scores, but that's where this comes from. So go ahead, Toya.
So, when I've worked with organizations, I have encouraged them to, with their teams, facilitate an exercise where you would identify the most common patient complaints and then do some script development. So using the model, how are we going to respond to those complaints when we hear them? And then what can we do to address those complaints so that your employees are equipped with the language and the solutions? And then on the back end, as leaders, how can we push or prioritize these common service failures and get them fixed? Now, I understand that there are some things that are big and daunting and systemic that we cannot fix easily. I also believe that in every situation, there is something that you can do. And so having that as a message with your teams, along with the skills to address service recovery, I think is a great way to give some guidelines for your staff. Susan, what do you think about that?
I think that's great. And I think this also is where, as we begin to implement these kinds of strategies everywhere, this is where leadership really matters. Because just as one example, we know that patient waits in ambulatory clinics, that one of the most common reasons why people have to wait a long time is when physicians show up late for their sessions. And we've looked at this at Mass General. We had one specialty service where the one of the improvement director for that service actually required every doctor that showed up late or every doctor that didn't get to their session on time to email her so she would know. And she was able to show them their data from the patient experience surveys, because once you're late, it's almost impossible to catch up. But that's an example where we put our frontline staff in an awkward position because they're the ones having to apologize when they have nothing to do with the problem, and they really don't have a lot of power to correct it. So that's where our leadership really is critical, so that there are boundaries set for everybody that's part of the delivery of care to help prevent some of these problems. And I think that's where our service alerts are going to be very interesting as we look to see what trends we have and where we need leadership to get involved to doing the process improvement to fix some of these issues.
Thank you, Susan. Any other comments, stories, or pushback about anything we've talked about so far?
This is Paige from Brigham and Women's Hospital. So I think, you know, it is so powerful, you know, to think about this framework for service recovery. I think that we're trying to also understand, and I'm sorry if you already mentioned this, I had to hop off for a huddle, but how to do a lot of this in the context as well of our safety reporting system as a very safe place for people to put these issues, an easy way for us to track trends, and already a robust structure to look at that. And so would just be curious how, you know, we can integrate that. Like, we've put a lot of safety reports in, you know, during the past few months about our visitor policy and about, you know, people's experiences sort of into our safety reporting framework, but how that will sort of well integrate into the NRC alert structure, and which one, if people are really only going to go to one in the issue of time, you know, how do we empower employees to use both, or which one to choose in different situations, I think would be interesting to hear.
Okay, yeah, I am going to talk about that page just in a bit. So is it okay if we just put that in the parking lot for a moment?
Of course. Thank you.
And please, if I don't answer, please, you know, call me out on it, because I will address that.
And Toya, can I just make a quick comment? I also think we've got people from Cooley Dickinson who've been doing this for a while with the service alerts with NRC, and we also have people from Mass Ioneer. So when we get to this later, they may also want to share how they have addressed that.
Perfect, thank you. So here's an example of an escalation process. As I mentioned, your point of service recovery strategy should include something like this, so that employees who find themselves in situations that they cannot turn around, they know the clear steps to escalate. So I just want to kind of summarize here. I, again, believe that all employees should have the skills to do service recovery with empathy and to take ownership to turn situations around. I think that philosophy has to be balanced by training, by giving employees the opportunity to do it, by establishing some firm boundaries and guidelines for them, and then supporting them when things don't go the way we hoped. So when you're thinking about your service recovery strategy, as it relates to point of service, please keep those things in mind. The other thing that I want to go back to is a comment you made, Susan, that these are life skills. So we are talking about service recovery in terms of how we interact with our coworkers, how we interact with patients and families, and these skills are applicable in every area of our life. You know, I find myself using them with my 10-year-old daughter. Like just the other day, she wanted another piece of cake, and I used the skills. I listened to her, I empathize. You know, sweetie, it is hard. I can understand why you would want another piece of cake. Apologize, I'm sorry, you can't have one. Own it. So here's what we can do. You know, we can go for a walk tonight, get some steps in, and maybe later we can have one piece that we share. You know, thank you for being open to my suggestion. So all of the steps with my daughter. Now, did that work? Not really, but I tried. You know, she negotiated with me a bigger piece of cake, but the skills were there. It didn't turn into a heated debate about the cake. We didn't fight. There were no tears. that there, when there might usually be. So these are, again, skills that you can use in every area of your life.
Toya, this is Christian. I think that's really powerful, and I was not at all thinking, in that way before you kind of made this point. I think Susan made this point as well, but I think it's a really kind of nice way to frame all of this work. That this, these are skills not just for us helping to empathize and support our patients, but the example of supporting coworkers, like you said, or at home, or de-escalating a situation at the the gas station. I mean, I don't know. These are sort of core fundamental kind of practices about how you acknowledge someone's feelings, respond, and are really broadly applicable. I think that's a nice way for, as we talk about these skills and service recovery as a system, to kind of frame them in that broader context. So I think that's really, really nice.
Thank you, Christian. And I also feel like when you frame it in that broader context, and then people have more opportunities to practice, right? Practice at home, practice at the gas station, right? And my husband used to tease me. He used to say, "Are you using that heart model on me?" And I say, "Yes, I am, and it works." So yeah, it's just I don't know, it is a good life skill. Let's switch gears a little bit. Our time is winding down to talk about service alerts. And I know that many of you are newly transitioning to the NRC platform. Others have more experience with it. So I just want to start with a definition of service alerts. Service alerts are patient comments that we believe are eligible for service recovery. Because our natural language processing system is triggered by some keywords. And some of those keywords may be related to malpractice or medical errors, mentions of abuse, harm, or neglect, threat of lawsuit, someone asked to be contacted, or threat of violence or suicide. So whenever any of these words or any words related to these categories are included in a patient comment, they are flagged as a service alert and sent to you. So when we looked at our database, so all of our clients and all of the service alerts that are triggered, we found that 42% of our service alerts are categorized as global triggers. And those global triggers include words that are direct, or phrases that are directly related to service recovery. And I've highlighted some of those in blue here. So our patients who are saying that they will not recommend us or never return to us. And if you recall back to our earlier conversation about the financial impact of that, it's huge. And then on the right column here is patients who say that we didn't apologize to them. And I found this to be so powerful. And to me, it speaks to the impact of an apology. And if you think about situations that maybe you've been in yourself, that can be, on a scale of kind of benign to really egregious. And how often do you say to yourself, you know what, they didn't even apologize? So just think about the power of that. They didn't even apologize. So an apology, I think, is so critical, so powerful. And this quote underscores that. An effective apology can decrease blame, decrease anger, increase trust, and improve relationships. Most importantly, in healthcare, apologies also have the potential to decrease the risk of a medical malpractice lawsuit and can help settle claims by patients. So again, I just want to open up the conversation for your comments or stories related to the importance of apologies.
Toya, I have a comment about this. In the patient safety work that I've been involved in, one of the things that we know, and you emphasize it here, is that organizations that apologize and don't shut down and stop communicating with patients or families when harm has happened have much lower malpractice payouts. They often, the people that have been involved in these events often become some of the biggest champions of the organization. And so I think this is incredibly important because we still have a mentality that when something really bad happens, we sort of batten the hatches and nobody talks to anybody, and that is about the worst thing you can do. Yeah. And I think these apologies, they're always important. I mean, just think about it in your personal life. Yeah. It makes such a huge difference.
Yes, thank you.
But there are tons of evidence-based publications about this on the safety front.
Yes. Thank you for sharing, Susan. And I think that's a perfect example of how safety and experience overlap, right? And how service recovery is a tool that can really help with both. So I appreciate you sharing that. Other comments or stories about effective apologies?
So this is Robin at Cooley Dickinson, and we've been using the NRC real-time program for a while. And I've had a number of times when I've reached back out to patients who have had a service alert. And one of the things that it's not true all of the time, but most of the time, just the fact that I'm reaching out and contacting them makes a huge difference. So, you know, you sometimes go into these situations a little, you know, the person's really mad. So it's easy to be, you know, a little like, oh my gosh, what am I going to get from them? But when I say, you know, I'm calling you to talk to you about your recent visit, and just the fact that I've contacted them is a very different flavor what I get from them than what they've left in the comment.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Robin. It's a perfect segue into the next slide. So at NRC Health, we have done some research on service recovery, and here are some stats that I would like to share with you. So what we've learned is that 84% of patients expect you to follow up with them if they have a bad care experience. So to your point, Robin, people want you to call. They want and expect you to call. And then nearly 75% of patients want you to follow up within 48 hours of providing that feedback. Now this, we believe, is what makes our real-time program so powerful, is because you can follow up, you know, within 48 hours versus with the CAPS surveys or more traditional paper surveys, you wouldn't get that feedback for weeks after the encounter. So now you are equipped to follow up within 48 hours. 54% of patients want you to call them by phone. So still, you know, even in the age of technology that we're living in right now, most patients want you to offer that phone follow-up. And I believe that's because there's a personal touch there. And then lastly, 46.3% of patients will consider the situation unrecoverable if you do not follow up with them in 48 hours. And so this puts your organization at risk for that negative word of mouth and social media feedback that we talked about. So your brand can be tarnished and you can lose patients to your competitors if you don't follow up with them. Another study that we published at NRC Health says that patients will switch a provider. I think it was something like 80% of patients will switch a provider for convenience factors alone. So already we are on rocky ground with our patients. You know, if someone can get them in sooner, if it's closer to their home, if their hours are longer, we are vulnerable. And so we are more vulnerable if we don't follow up with our patients within 48 hours. So again, I want to open for thoughts, your impressions of these statistics. Thoughts or comments or pushback even.
Hi, this is Janet Barnes up at North Shore Medical Center. First of all, this has been an excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Really, we're learning a lot. I'm learning a lot. I'll speak for myself. But this is really helpful information to us, I think. And you know, when I think about my own experiences, whether it's in healthcare or not, and you know, you touched on this earlier, when you have a dissatisfactory experience and you've given that feedback and you're expecting a call back, you're right. I mean, I know I've done the exact same thing where it's like, I'm never going back there again. And so, but seeing this in writing, I think will help us and help our team, you know, respond better. I mean, we do think that we, you know, our typical complaint and grievance process is, you know, you get the complaint letter in or you get the phone call or the email and our team will follow up. But I think just based on the service alerts, regardless of what the issue is, I think having that opportunity to follow up with the patient, even if they're not expecting follow-up, will help you, you know, really recover, hopefully the experience and keep the patient. And that, I think, should always be our goal, is keeping the patient within the system and not losing them to a competitor.
Yeah.
So thank you for this.
No, thank you for your comments, Janet. Any others? Okay. So what I recommend is that all organizations put together a service alert process that is well-defined and seamless. And it begins with determining the criteria for follow-up. Because what you will find in our service alerts is that there may be things that the patient is unhappy with, that you as an organization decide, you know what, we're not going to follow up with that. Instead, we're going to use that to inform our process improvement efforts. So some examples, you might decide, you know, we're not going to follow up with complaints about parking. We're not going to follow up with complaints about food. Our research tells us that those sorts of complaints are not highly correlated to whether or not someone would recommend you or if they're satisfied with their overall experience. So to manage the workload of follow-up, you may decide that no, we're not going to follow up with those. And it is totally up to you. But I always recommend that you have some criteria in place for follow-up so that it is consistent across your organization. So for example, I work with one organization and the criteria that they use is they follow up if it's medically urgent. They follow up if a patient requests it, and they follow up if they believe that that service alert can turn into something more serious. So those are the 3 guidelines that they use. And then develop a process that clearly outlines who's gonna follow up and when. And the goal should be to follow up within 48 hours. Now, Paige, I wanna go back to your question about the documentation. If you haven't seen this already, in our real-time program, there is the ability to document a service alert and close it out. And we recommend that you do that at the bare minimum. Now, depending on the nature of the alert and how you align this with your grievance management process, you may also decide to document that service alert in your grievance management software. And I don't believe that there is a right or wrong way to do this. What I have been encouraging organizations to do is to get a group of your patient advocates or patient relations folks together, your risk management people together, your patient experience teams, and get those folks together to develop this process so that as many points of view are included as possible, so that you're not duplicating workflows, putting your risk management efforts at risk, so to speak, and that there is as much alignment as possible. So I'm going to pause for a bit, and Paige, ask you, what are your thoughts on that, and what further questions might you have?
Yeah, thank you. That's so helpful, and I love seeing this criteria. I think that I think it will need to be like a robust conversation, right? About like, if someone has a concern about a medical urgency, that may go into a different bucket or be a different person responding than someone who's like, I'm really unhappy with, some aspect of my experience or the parking or, X, Y, Z. Like, to me, we may decide, and again, it does need to be like a robust and multidisciplinary sort of discussion, as you suggested, how to triage that moving forward, and where to triage that, in a short time frame. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see where we land and how, we're as an organization so behind others on this call in terms of this work, but have developed really robust integration of patient-family relations along with our risk and safety team. And so hopefully that will be quite seamless. But I think this tool will be wonderful, but then how we then feed that tool into our safety tool, I think, is work maybe for all of us to do, because I think many of us use the same safety system.
Yeah.
So
Toya, can I just add something here? Because I think this is where I think we can all learn from each other. But one of the things that we're going to test in primary care at Mass General, we have 22 plus practices, and we're going to test directing the service alerts depending on the nature of the alert. If it's something that's a medical urgency or whatever, that would go to the medical director. If it's something that's more an administrative or an operations problem, that would go to the administrative manager. And if it's something related to triage or nursing care or whatever, that would go to the nurse manager. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know how it's going to break down, but that's how we're going to start. So that we get these to the right people to respond. And the other thing that I would just ask, I think Liza is still on the call, because we've been seeing a lot of data, even though we just started up this week. And I also think that well, Liza, you can comment on this, but the alerts, I mean, we are getting alerts, but many of them are not things that we would necessarily have to respond to. And some of them, just because of the language that the person uses, aren't really even an alert. But Liza, I don't know if you have any comments about that, or Robin, who've had more experience with things.
Yeah, I mean, our experience to date has been just that all alerts require an eye on them, but we are finding that several of them are positive. Several of them can be closed out pretty quickly. Maybe the comments relate to a given topic that we could then batch and send to the right person in time. So there are a handful that are negative, and then a handful that kind of rise to that next level of almost egregious or egregious, and what do we do about this? And we have had conversations about the intersection with safety reporting and the Office of Patient Advocacy and how best to develop those workflows. And it's definitely a work in progress.
Thank you.
And go ahead.
Oh, and this is Robin from Cooley Dickinson. So some of our alerts, we find, if someone has said in the alert, like, I'm going to take you to court, or, I'm going to sue you, that when that goes to our risk department, we ask the manager to put that into MIDAS, that often the risk department has also received something else from that patient or their family. They're already aware of the situation, or when this situation occurred, the director of that department brought that up at that time. So it's often, you know, somebody who is that upset has often made multiple contacts with the organization, so that we find often that we actually know about the situation through other venues than just the service alert process.
So a question on that, you know, I think Paige brought this up earlier, and one of the departments we were speaking with asked this question. You know, they have so many safety reports coming to them, and to avoid duplication, you know, is there a way to connect the systems so that they're not looking at the same issue twice, one through safety reporting and one coming perhaps through the person in their department reviewing these alerts, or perhaps from the Office of Patient Experience? So just trying to figure out, is there a way to connect these more closely, and could the systems potentially talk to each other at one point?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. We receive that a lot, and I know that our development team is working on how to, you know, have our real-time system talk to various risk management systems. And so I will take that as an action item. Do you use Midas, you said?
We use RL Solution.
RL, yeah.
RL, yeah.
Okay, so I will take that as an action item to see where we are with that development.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure.
Toya, this is Mary from Partners Health at Home, and right before COVID struck, and it was all COVID all the time, we were working with RL Solutions, the safety reporting, and actually splitting off what was risk reporting, what was a safety event, and what was a customer experience event. And so we were able to work with the RL Solutions admin at PCC, developing a reporting system using RL Solutions that would come to my department, customer experience, and we defined what was a safety event, what was in customer experience, and those now fly off to me to be able to, you know, deal with right away. And then we have the reporting on it. And there's all sorts of scenarios that somebody can check off, and then we can trend things. And our next step, we wanted to be able to now look at reporting and see what our trends were for process improvements.
Yeah, that's huge, Mary. I'm so happy to hear you're doing that. So what I would say, just to add, is now you have another input from our real-time program. And so you'll have to think about how will these service alerts fall into that existing process.
Right, yeah, I mean, I hadn't been aware of this. I don't think PHH has been involved in this, so it's good to hear about.
Okay, awesome. And then I'm happy if you would ever want to have a specific conversation about this. I'd love to do that, Susan, with this group or a smaller group, and also share some workflows that I've collected from other organizations, if that will help.
I think that would definitely be worthwhile, because, you know, we're all just kind of getting up to speed, because all of our real-time surveying for the people that started earlier just is cranking up this week. So I think we've got some time, but I think that would be really great.
Okay, yeah, just let me know when you're ready. And I'll preface that conversation by saying, you know, this is one of the areas of patient experience that I believe there is no real best practice for. Like, the best practice is to follow up within 48 hours. And then you as an organization have to figure out how you're going to do that. And then, you know, my advice always is to leverage existing workflows. Like, I don't believe that we have to start from scratch here. So again, I can share what others are doing, but your approach may be different, just depending on how you currently do things.
I agree.
Okay. And then just a final thought about service alerts. When we are following up with service alerts, if we do so without using the skill set that I talked about earlier, then we just risk escalating that situation. It's just a task that we check off. I mean, whether we are doing service recovery in person, because someone brought in a complaint to our attention right away, or we're following up within 48 hours, the key is to do so with empathy, to apologize without placing blame or making excuses, to own that situation and to do what you can to turn it around. And then in our last 2 minutes or so, I just want to talk high level about aligning this with how you currently handle grievances and complaints. We've talked a bit about that with service alerts, but I think that this is an opportunity for you to maximize workflows and also maximize the expertise of your patient advocates. When you align these workflows, it helps identify inconsistencies in how grievances are handled. In the assessment that you all completed, the vast majority of you said that the way that you handle grievances across your system is different and can be different from location to location. So here presents an opportunity to gain some consistencies. It also can help your patient advocates focus on the work that requires their skill sets. In that assessment, you also said that the majority of the time, your advocates are called in to help with situations that could have been handled at the point of service. So if we can eliminate that, take that off their plate, it frees them up to handle those more egregious grievances and complaints. And then lastly, all of this helps to create a culture that really embraces complaints. And Janet, you spoke to this. It takes your organization beyond just complying with CMS requirements for grievance management, you know, writing the letters and all of that, which we know is important, and we have to do that. But if we truly want to be a customer-oriented organization, we have to create a culture that expands beyond that compliance and truly embraces complaints. So that concludes my presentation. We have about a minute or so left. What questions, comments, or pushback do you have about anything I've shared this morning?
There's a question in the chat, but one thing before we address that is I actually have to run another Zoom in about a minute. That's one of our Zoom town halls. So I'm going to need to close this out. So we're not going to have a big chance for a warm goodbye. But Toya, this has been fantastic. And I think you've just opened up our eyes about many things that are going to be helpful to us to plan and think about going forward. But let me just, hang on, I want to just, Jane Hayward from Newton Wellesley asked if you can offer suggested opening language to use when making the service alert response phone call. And for multifaceted complaints, do you recommend a single point of follow-up or multiple? And it may be that you have to respond to that in writing.
Yeah.
Because I literally have to welcome people to another Zoom.
Okay, I will. I have some language that I can send. I'll send it to you, Susan, for distribution.
We'll
and
share
I do recommend a 1 point or a team, like a joint call, if that's possible, to handle a multifaceted complaint.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And thank you so much. This has been really wonderful. And Susan, I know we need to wrap this up, but I just want to say it would be great if potentially as people kind of digest this, sit with it a little bit, if we could schedule, you know, a follow-up, you know, time to have some more open discussion, because this has been so helpful.
Yeah, just to jump in, I think that we do have time to follow up during our August 6th meeting.
Great.
So we'll be able, and Toya will be joining that meeting. And so we'll have some time to debrief and talk about next steps.
Wonderful.
And just for all the people on the call today, the August 6th meeting is the Patient Experience Leaders Committee meeting. So not everybody, we had 85 people on this call. So I don't think all of them are part of that committee, but your patient experience leaders are. And so it would be an opportunity to share questions with them, and then we can explore those more on the 6th. So.
Yeah, and we will send an invite to today's attendees with more information about that coming shortly.
Great.
All right. Well, have a wonderful weekend,
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
Toya, good luck with your cake negotiations. And thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Toya.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.